The myth and legend of Wyatt Earp has been told countless times on television and in movies. In this one particular movie, Tombstone, it's an interesting look because it's claiming to be one of the more historically accurate films, at least in its portrayal of Wyatt Earp. It still leaves a lot out. I'm not here to discuss what's historically accurate or inaccurate, but rather take a look at Tombstone and how it's different from the other movies of its time, but also how it continues to sort of push this historically inaccurate narrative that Wyatt Earp himself created for his own legend decades prior. Before we get into it, if you're like this video, you're going to want to do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. It's free to you. It means the world to me. A lot has been said about the production of Tombstone, and I'm not going to get too much into that here. That movie went through a few directors, and there were stories for decades that it was Kurt Russell himself that actually ended up directing the film, something that he denies to this very day. And the chaos behind the camera didn't stop them from making what is, quite frankly, probably one of the most famous and, in my opinion, greatest Westerns of all time. Now, there's a lot of different types of Western films within the genre. Itself. The silent movies were insanely popular for the birth of Hollywood, and Wyatt Earp himself worked on some of these earliest films, especially when it came to telling, quite frankly, his own story. You've got your classic John Wayne movies, and I am a fan of most of the John Wayne movies. Probably not so much the ones about the cowboys and Indians, but I do love a good John Wayne movie. Then you've got your spaghetti westerns, and man, to compare a John Wayne Western to a spaghetti Western, it's almost like you're comparing two completely different genres. And then in the 1980s, you saw the sort of birth of the more, what I would call, historically accurate leaning Westerns, but still based on that romantic idealism of our push to the West. Finally, in the 90s and going into the 2000s, that's where you really started to see what I call the historically accurate, just holy crap, look out, this movie is going to be brutally honest type Westerns. But Tombstone came out in the early 90s, going into the mid 90s. And it's definitely an interesting mix of spaghetti Western with a movie that wants to take the subject of the OK Corral and Wyatt Earp's time in Tombstone somewhat historically serious. But it has these tropes in it that keep it somewhat light and different. For example, it's got, the opening and closing narration, the colorful characters, the dialogue, the memorable lines that we continue to quote to this day. So it's not something that takes itself so serious as compared to the Kevin Costner Wyatt Earp movie, which we're going to get into in a completely separate video. But it was the movie Tombstone that, quite frankly, even turned me on to who Wyatt Earp was and made me fall in love with not only the man as sort of this historical hero, right? Like the fictitious version that so many of us believe is the true Wyatt Earp, but it also made me want to learn more about who the real Wyatt Earp was. It was Kurt Russell and Val Kilmer's on-screen chemistry and that relationship between the characters of Doc Holliday and Wyatt Earp that made me want to learn more about the truth. And that's why I picked up Lake's biography of Wyatt Earp that everyone probably has read at some point. If they're at all a fan of Wyatt Earp, that's usually the first book you find and the first book you read. And it's kind of a double-edged sword because a lot of it just isn't that historically accurate. And Tombstone is continuing to push the myth that Wyatt Earp and Lake sort of created back in the 1920s in this movie. And what's fascinating to me is how it's one of the few Westerns that wasn't afraid to have every single character, not every single character, but so many of the characters that were actually involved in what was going on in Tombstone, because we want so bad with our storytelling to be simple. We want A to happen, and then B to happen, and then C to happen. And with real life, it just doesn't work that way. It's messy, it's complicated, it's political. And that's the true story of Tombstone and what happened at the shootout at the OK Corral. It wasn't bad guys versus good guys. It was bad guys versus questionable guys at best. And historians will argue to this day over the true nature of the gunfight at the OK Corral. But to me, what Tombstone did was not only capture the imagination of what really happened in history, but the colorfulness of it. It's one of the few Westerns where you see them dressed in these colorful outfits, speaking in such colorful language. And it does simplify the truth, but there's still a lot of truth in it. And you wouldn't think that this is the movie that's going to do that based on the style in which the story is told. It comes off rather fantastical, almost comical or comic booky, with a hint of campiness to it, but somehow it all works. If somebody that didn't know anything about the Wild West or Wyatt Earp was to take a look at Tombstone versus the Kevin Costner Wyatt Earp movie, they're going to point to the Kevin Costner movie and say, well, this is clearly the more historically accurate one. Even if you only show them the Tombstone scenes in the Wyatt Earp movie with Kevin Costner, they would still probably say, well, that's got to be the more historically accurate one. And the point and the truth is that both movies sort of complement each other when it comes to the truth, because Tombstone isn't completely accurate, and what Tombstone is missing is in the Kevin Costner movie. The Kevin Costner movie ain't really all that accurate because it doesn't spend 2.5 hours focusing on just Tombstone, Arizona. So they got to leave a lot out, and that's where Tombstone comes in to fill in those gaps. It's a fascinating comparison to watch these sort of two movies side by side. And I'm sure people debate this all the time. I'm not the type to sit here and tell you which movie is better. They're two very different movies serving two very different purposes, and I love them both. It really comes down to what am I in the mood for? If I'm in the mood for something that's really fun, has a lot of energy, colorful characters, I feel like speaking the dialogue along with the characters, well, then clearly that's Tombstone. They still make t-shirts to this day with Val Kilmer's Doc Holliday and some of his more famous quotes from this movie on it. And if there's one thing as a writer myself in Hollywood that I've taken away from the movie Tombstone, it's that in order to attract the right talent for your movies, write for them the most amazing character, the most colorful character, and give them the scenery to chew on like it's candy. I write so many of my characters, not like they're exactly like Doc Holliday, but a little larger than life, colorful. Give them something cool to say and do, and really give them meaning behind all their actions. Subtlety is key in filmmaking and in film storytelling. But at the same time, if you're too subtle, too bland, too pulled back, the actor is going to read it and go, if you offer me $1 million, but if you write for them the most colorful, amazing character, good or bad guy, they will look at that script and they'll go, man, I really want to do this part. I want to do this scene right here specifically. This scene is I love the way this character says this and does that. And they get very excited about that. And that's a lot of the times where you can push a better financial deal in place, shall we say, for your talent. But it was Tombstone the movie that got me interested in who Wyatt Earp was as a man. And I got to tell you, after 26 years of an amateur historian that is constantly reading and watching stuff about Wyatt Earp, if I had to pick which movie was the more historically accurate portrayal of Wyatt Earp, the Kevin Costner movie or Tombstone, I got to tell you, they're both right. Wyatt Earp wasn't your sullen, soft-spoken lawman always. He had his moments of silence and stare you down, but he was also a family man. He was a very outgoing person, at least in his youth. In his more middle-aged adult years, especially when he did get to Tombstone, he was a little more soft-spoken, but he was there to make money. He was there to run a business, to provide for not only himself, but his family. He wasn't there to be a hero. He was there to make money in any which way he could. And Tombstone shows this, but it also portrays Wyatt Earp, again, as that sort of Clark Kent, Superman, superhero, like, yeah, I might be a bit of a ruffian, but I know right from wrong, and I am here to always do what's right, That's how he's kind of portrayed in Tombstone a little bit. And if you can sort of take the moments of levity from Wyatt Earp and mix that with Kevin Costner's performance of Wyatt Earp, I think you would just have the most spot-on representation of the man. But Tombstone's an amazing movie. You don't need me to tell you that. Every character in this movie is just flipping quotable. And every character, no matter how big or little their screen time is in Tombstone, you want to learn more about because they're all based on real people. Johnny Ringo is easily probably my favorite character outside of Doc Holliday and Wyatt Earp in the movie. And his true story is so much more fascinating than anything we get to see in the movie. And Johnny Ringo in Tombstone easily steals every scene he's in. You almost want to leave the Tombstone movie and go to the Johnny Ringo movie. That's how fascinating that character is. And this movie is filled with countless characters just like that. And you can learn about every single one of them. And they almost all deserve their own movie. And that's what I love about Tombstone. So some of it is obviously nostalgia berries because it opened up my eyes to this whole history of people that came and saw and conquered. Guys, I'm writer producer Trader Bubba. Thanks so much. Don't forget to like, subscribe. It really helps this channel grow. Special shout out to today's sponsor, me, and TraderBubba.com, home to the official merch for all my YouTube channels. If you love Westerns, if you love pets, or if you love sci-fi, I have a sci-fi channel. I have a lot of great stuff going on at TraderBubba.com. Use discount code YouTube on your first order to save 10%. All proceeds go to a good cause. They don't go to me. They don't go to the YouTube channel. If you want to support the YouTube channel, hit subscribe and come back for this next video that's popping up right here.